Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Ultra Confusion Thursday Night Hangout. I, of course, am your host, Charlie, and I'm joined once again by the prolific commoner himself, Zealeus.
Sup?
And we have a special guest for this evening, and that, of course, is the one, the only, Eddy Webb.
Woo! Eddy Webb!
Hack it, Jerry. Nope, we're not talking Uncharted for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Zealeus, Charlie, and it's just timing out.
Yeah, it's like it keeps on. Your computer's going to sleep. That's what it is.
There we go. I'll fix that. Anyways, so Eddy here is the mastermind behind a game called Pugmire. Pugmire?
Actually, I don't know if you can really read that because of the shine.
No, I can see it. It's right there. Whoops.
Well, there's a binder that says "Be a good dog."
Be a good dog.
I can read backwards.
So let's get right into it. Eddy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see. I've been a designer and writer professionally for 14 years now, which therefore means I'm an overnight success.
14 years.
Yeah, 14 years.
Good job, Madonna.
But no, I started. My first professional gig was working on a tabletop role-playing game called Cartoon Action Hour, which was a game that used to emulate 80s action cartoons like G.I. Joe and Transformers. And that actually got some attention, a couple of award nominations, and so I was like, oh, this writing for painting might be good. So I worked freelance for a few years. I worked on things like Know Your Role for the WWE role-playing game. I worked on Red Dwarf. But I'd always been, since the 90s, a big fan of White Wolf. And so I ended up, a friend of mine who worked at the company mentioned that they were looking for someone to work on a live action product. And I've been really big into live action for many, many years. So some conversations happened, and I ended up working on the Mind's Eye Theater Mage the Awakening book for live action. That took me about a year kind of just slowly hammering at it. But they were really happy with the results of that. So when White Wolf merged with a video game company, CCP, they did some hiring, and I was brought in to be what they were calling the alternative publishing developer, working on PDFs, print on demand, and just finding ways to modernize the publishing of tabletop role-playing games. So I worked there. I ended up transferring to the late lamented World Arts MMO,
which I, of course, almost got hired for twice.
A lot of people almost got hired for it, and a lot of people were no longer working for it. But I worked on that for several years. But I was also still working on tabletop stuff. I was helping with the White Wolf publishing side of things, so I ended up being the kind of Uber developer for a lot of products. I was doing my own podcast at the time, called White Wolf Blogcast. And then I got the chance to work on Vampire the Masquerade 20th Anniversary Edition. And that was just a huge, huge book. That was 4 months of my life, just really focused on getting that put out there. And it was really satisfying. And then more people were like, hey, this is something we want to get involved with and see more of. So we got involved. We tried the V20 Companion on KickStarter, which was relatively new at the time. This was 2011. So it's like, we saw some moderate success for interacting with the community in that respect. And so ever since then, I had been really interested in doing more stuff with Kickstarter, and Onyx Path has since done, this is their 20th Kickstarter, so there's been a lot of them. They learned a lot. When I was laid off 2014, yes, it was 14, I looked for work for a couple of months, did not go as well as I hoped, so I said, well, I'll just work for myself. So I formed Pugsteady, which is my own company, and also became full-time freelancing contractors. So since then, I've had a chance to work with great companies like Wooga. I worked with them on the Futurama video games coming out. I worked with an interactive novel, which you guys actually reviewed.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Rage War, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was with Choice of Games. And also, doing a lot of work with Onyx Path as a freelancer. I've worked with a number of other tabletop RPG companies. But one of the things I wanted to do was to start working on my own intellectual property, something that's completely mine, that I could partner with great people on. Because I love playing with those sandboxes, but there's a different kind of freedom you get from working on your own. So that leads us to here.
Cool. Real quick, were you a fan of the TV show that was based on the?
Oh,
the
Kid the
universe?
Embrace?
Yeah.
I actually have the DVD set.
My buddy, when I worked at where I used to work, he actually had the entire VHS set.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of VHS.
And he's like, dude, you need to watch it. I'm like, but I don't have a VCR. He goes, but you need to find a VCR. This is awesome.
It converts to DVD, man.
Yeah.
It's really cool kids too.
It was. Well, I mean, the thing is that with Kindred the Embraced, I've always posited that if it had been done 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it would have been like the most amazing thing. I mean, it really would have been True Blood, but it was just a little too early. It was on public television, was cable television,
Right.
and I think it just a little too early, the wrong network. It just didn't quite find the same. But I mean, I've always thought it had potential, and there are purists who strongly disagree with the vision of it, and I can certainly understand why. But there's also a lot of if you look past some of the ways they approach it, there's actually some interesting stuff in there. It's a pretty decent job.
I have a question about, to mention history, one thing you mentioned was Vampire the Masquerade.
Mm-hmm.
Is also a fantastic video game.
Yes.
Is what you were working on actually have to do with the video game, or what was kind of the relationship between the two?
So the previous video games, the ones that got released like Bloodlines and Redemption, those were before my time.
Okay.
And the relationship, as I understood it, was that those were basically licensed out. So a video studio would license it from White Wolf and work on it. That said, there was an interesting relationship because when we were working on other products, it was like, how much of that can we reference?
Right.
And so this is kind of weird because of the nature of licensing. All the stuff that we put into our books, we could obviously use.
Right.
And some stuff that made it in Bloodlines was then later put into Vampire the Masquerade books, so then we could use. But there's still category material that actually was owned by Activision because of the nature of how licensing works. And so it became this interesting little, like, well, how much that can we nod to and allude to. And ultimately, now I understand with Paradox acquiring it all, it's all kind of in their hands, so that it's a lot clearer. But at the time, there was this interesting kind of hydra of licensing relationships akin to, like, say, the Shadowrun license, which is its own, like, kind of weird, incestuous or Ouroboros of licensing.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So the next question, of course, is what is Pugmire?
What is Pugmire? Pugmire is a fantasy game set in the ancient future. Basically, it is far, far, far in the future, thousands of years in the future, and humanity is gone. It's not clear whether they died out, whether they simply disappeared, they evolved into a new species, they plowed other planets, whatever. The point is, they're just not there. And uplifted dogs have inherited the world. So it's kind of like Lord of the Rings meets Planet of the Apes. But it has dogs instead of apes.
What about cats?
Cats are a part of it, but they're not focus of the core game. They're part of the same world.
I have cats.
No, I totally get that.
I like my cats.
Trust me, I had a lot of cat fans like, we're not cats.
I did see that in the comments. They kept referencing, like, I don't remember what it was, like in the Kickstarter comments.
The Monarchies of Mao.
Yeah, what is that?
So, in the world, this core game is focused on the kingdom of Pugmire, which is where the dogs live. But, a number of years in the past, about 2 generations in the past, there was a big war with the cat monarchies. And the monarchies are now basically a series of city-states that the cats all have kind of banded together into this collective unit. So they're not one nation. It's lots of kind of more like Renaissance Italy in terms of how they have the different city-states. So the cats and the dogs are now to the point where they're trying to come to a tenuous peace, but there's still a lot of distrust because of what happens in the past generations of the war.
Yep.
So there are some cats that live in Pugmire. There's some dogs that live in the Monarchies of Mao. But it's kind of, for lack of better terms, kind of like post, like early 90s, post-perestroika U.S.-Russia relationships, where it's like, they're tense, they're nominally at peace, but there's still a lot of potential for espionage or just trust on both sides.
Okay, cool. I may have a follow-up question about that later.
No worries.
I think once we hear more about it.
Absolutely.
All right, so I did a little bit. Of course, I'm one of the backers, and
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Deeply.
I definitely put a little bit of money into it. By little, I mean over $100.
That's my cat food.
Yeah. But the one thing that I was very interested in seeing, and I'm good. Hopefully, I don't know if this is gonna actually show.
Any ferrets?
Yeah, no ferrets. But this is the
Character sheet.
Man, oh man, I cannot talk. And so you have item aptitudes, which of course is your ability. I'm assuming the items that you actually can use. Could you use items that you're not assigned, or would you do it at a penalty?
Well, how I did equipment. Well, let's take a step back a little bit. One of the things that I dislike about a lot of traditional fantasy gaming is
Classic fantasy right here.
right. Is that I don't like tracking the cash. It's like, I have 15 electrum and 25 copper. Can I get this piece of rope? And it's like that kind of micromanagement always seems like you don't really see it in the fiction, fantasy fiction.
Mm-hmm.
In fantasy fiction, either you have the items because you're assumed to be a prepared adventurer, or you don't have it for some narrative important reason. Conan stories are a good example of this, where it's like his rope snaps and that becomes relevant later on in the story.
Right.
So. In Pugmire, what I do is I have a lot of equipment that's assigned. Basically, when you make your character, you get a whole bunch of equipment at the start. And then when you are getting ready to go off to adventure, when you leave civilization, you can choose one additional thing that's mundane, but your character would have. Like,
right.
Well, and we know we're going to go fight zombies, so let's go ahead and make sure we have edge weapons. Edge weapons now. But then once you're on the adventure, if there's something that's, and I call the equipment the rucksack, if there's something that your character you think would have, but it's not listed in your rucksack, you get to make a saving throw. And if you make that die roll, then you add it to your sheet. Well, of course I packed rope. Why wouldn't I pack rope? It's right here in my other pocket. Oh, there it is. But if you don't, then you actually, narratively it's been established that you don't have that.
Right.
And so you have to continue on without it.
I did like, when I was looking over the pre-version, the alpha version of your document, that in I guess like the game master or dungeon master side, you kind of give the power to the dungeon master or the game master to basically allow the character to say, well, I've got 10 plastic coins. Do I have enough to buy this? It's not like here's the menu and here's the set prices.
Right. And the reason why I did that is because in terms of getting stuff, one of the things I didn't want to do is in the way computer role-playing games and a lot of classic fantasy works is I have to kill things to take their stuff to get better equipment so I can kill more things to take their stuff. By taking the actual both experience point and currency coming out of it, then it's you have enough to get by on things and you can get reasonable equipment. So then it becomes money's only important for things like we traveled really far and we find an inn. Do we have enough coins to pay for our night?
Right.
And if it doesn't matter, then the game master just goes, it doesn't matter, you're in. Or if it's really important, say, okay, no, cross off, that you have some coins in a sheet. Cross off your coins, and you can save the night. Then you're going to have no cash for if you want to bribe the guard later. So that's really what the cash is for. It becomes a narrative tool. It's like, okay, do I use this now or use this later? But it's much more of a chunk. One thing I haven't gone into in the open access or the early access is that basically there's a few coins, some coins, many coins, and a lot of coins. And you basically scale up and down. It's like, we got treasures now, I go from a few coins to some coins. Or I spent a little bit of coin to bribe a guard, so I went from some coins to a few coins. So there's a little bit of a scale there that I haven't articulated. But again, it's the idea of rich characters. If your concept is you're noble, then this kind of stuff is not a barrier for you. It's like, oh, yeah, I have coins, no problem. I just throw it around. And so the player doesn't feel like, well, I'm rich, but I have to save because I need to buy this sword later. It's like, no, they should spend it like water because that's the fun part of being a rich character.
Right.
Poor characters, it's like, if you don't have any coins on your sheet, then it's like, okay, it occasionally becomes a barrier. But so much of fantasy fiction is the poor, beleaguered peasants that makes their way into being a supreme hero. And so the fact that it's like, it's amazing you want to be this hero, but you can't afford armor, so I guess you die.
Yeah.
Again, it struck a wrong note with me, and so that's why I changed the flipper to make it so it's interesting. When money becomes important, it's important. When it's not important, it just isn't.
You also said there's no level ups in the game?
There is level ups with experience points.
So how do you level up then if there's no experience
basically, after a story or two, whenever it makes sense for the characters to have improved, the game master says, okay, everyone goes up a level, and then everyone goes up at the same time. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, again, a lot of classic role-playing games or classic fantasy games. You level up primarily through violence. And that was not a goal for this game. I want it to be equally viable to talk your way through or just run away from monsters. I mean, I think it's perfectly fair that you're going through this ancient ruin of man, and then you find these anime statues turn and look at you and like, I'm out.
Right.
And I think that should be fun and appropriate. And if it makes for a good story, then you level up. If escaping is part of it. And one of the playtests I did, they went to this necromancer's lair and they made their way through very carefully, and then they kept passing all of these statues, and they got to the end. They grabbed this artifact of man, this ancient holy relic, and then all the statues turned to them, and they just said, nope, and just ran out. They made checks to dodge around the skeleton or the statues, make sure they could escape. But when they finally got out, that was exciting and interesting. Right. So whether they fought them or ran from them, it was still interesting. It was worth going up a level. But in a lot of traditional games, it's, okay, well, you don't get anything because you ran away. So that's another reason why, from a story perspective, it makes more sense to get more powerful.
So it sounds like you're trying to make it more narrative-driven instead of like having like set combats right here.
Absolutely.
You leave here, you're fighting a skeleton. You have no choice. You have options as a player of how are you going to deal with that that you don't necessarily see in other games.
Exactly, and actually it ties back a little bit to your earlier comment about cats. One of the things I wanted to do, and I was very passionate about, was that there are no evil species. There is no orc analog where it's like, oh, basically they're evil, we have to kill them, and they're not talk to them. There are monsters. There are certainly monsters, and there are objectively evil forces that you can combat, but they're not as prevalent as a typical fantasy game. And so another reason why I wanted to make that narrative is because if you get attacked by cat bandits and you end up, as a result, negotiating a peace with a whole bunch of bandit tribes, that's just as interesting as if you beat them all, shake them down for cash, and walk away.
We've seen that before.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so this is a different way of looking at it, and it allows people to kind of try new options and freeze them up, so that you can talk your way out of things. You can just avoid it. It's like, we're just not going to go there. That would be a smart thing to do. It's like, let's just, hey, there's a whole bunch of demons over there. We're just going to go this way. And that, if you take those kinds of tactics, they should be rewarded if it makes sense.
Right.
So you're right. It is a lot of it is taking the guts of traditional games like Dungeons and Dragons and reconceiving them to make them much more narratively driven.
That's cool.
One of the interesting things that I did notice when I was just trying to quickly make my my character sheet out was that instead of having to roll for every single stat, you basically have, here is 6 numbers, and just put them in there, and then utilize what your bonuses or your oh my gosh, I'm breaking penalties or bonuses to each of those stats depending on what type of character you are, what breed you are, and that kind of stuff. And that makes, in my mind, that makes it a lot easier to feel like I can own the character, but jump into the game where I'm not spending like an entire day going, all right, well, here we go. Well, I don't like that roll. We have to roll all of them.
Right, exactly. And this comes from games like World of Darkness. In World of Darkness games, you have a set number of dots you apply to your abilities. And so the challenge of character creation doesn't become, how do I find the maximum benefit from this random roll, but rather from, how do I prioritize this in a way that I find interesting and compelling. That isn't to say random roll isn't fun. I mean, I have run a lot of things like not only old school D&D, but also like original Marvel superheroes, where you use completely random superhero. There can be fun in those kinds of random rolls, but that wasn't what I was going for in this one. This one, I wanted people to basically look at it and say, nope, okay, I want to be a strong character, but I want to be a little dumb. And the point spread is specifically, it's actually from D&D 5th edition, but it's very good because it gives you one stat that's below, a couple that are average, and a couple that are pretty good.
Right.
So out of the gate, you're doing some pretty cool stuff. You can do everything well.
Right. Yeah, I put all my, for me, I was a ratter, so it's basically like your rogue. And I put heavy emphasis on dexterity.
So the characters, when you're starting to party together, is like there a set number of people you should party with, or kind of what's the party guideline?
Well, I balanced it with the idea that I assumed most groups would go with the fairly traditional one of each group. And it's like you're gonna have a fighter, you're gonna have a cleric, you're gonna have a mage. That being said, there's a lot of ways to tweak that if you don't want to do it that way. One of the things that I did with this is I wanted to emphasize that this game about cooperation. cooperation,
Mhm.
because dogs work together, and the theme of the game actually, if you in the original book, it says it's salvation through cooperation. Um, Dogs become better when they work together to try to elevate themselves and each other. They don't always do it for benevolent reasons. They don't always do it for good reasons, and sometimes they do it almost in spite of themselves. But that is kind of the core of the game. So there's two sides to this. One is all of the tricks, with the exception of the stray, which is kind of the barbarian analog, the dogs who've left civilization.
Mhm.
All the rest of the callings have their powers are meant to help each other out. So, like, I have inspiring word as a warrior, or what I call the guardian, and I can give you dice that you can then roll to heal.
Mhm.
Same with the cleric, I can give you dice and you can then heal. The artisan encourages people, and they can give them bonus dice. So there's lots of I can help you, and then hopefully you will help me.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of powers that give yourself direct benefits. So in one way the system is that there's lots of each group can help each other out based on how they pick their powers. The other side of it also is what I call the fortune mechanic. Is there's a bowl, something like this that you put in the center of the table.
With Mountain Dew.
Well, no, it's empty.
It's empty.
But as your dogs do interesting things, or as your dogs lean into flaws that they have, fortune is put into the bowl. I, as game master, would say, okay, you did, you yelled at the cat when you're trying to make peace with the cat, so I'll give you some fortune. Or you tripped and fell, and with guards chasing you, so I'll give you fortune. You can also choose to intentionally fail your rolls, like. I can roll this, but I'm probably going to fail anyway, so I'm just going to intentionally say, I'm not going to roll, I'm intentionally failing, and then you can force me to put fortune in the poll, to get in kind of that narrative. The early setbacks lead to big payoffs. But the quirk is that when you spend fortune, you can re-roll any die. But anyone can draw from the bowl. And anyone can draw from the bowl, as long as nobody in the party says no.
Okay.
So is it okay if I take this? If no one says no, then you can. But it does require group consensus for those rerolls. So again, it reinforces that this is about cooperation. This is about doing things together. So if you don't have the maximum optimal party, other people usually have tricks that can help you out to kind of fill in those gaps. And also, because you are doing worse because you have a gap in your build, as it were, you're building up more fortune that you can then spend actually filming. So the game ends up helping itself out. So if you have a smaller party, you get more fortune, you spend more fortune. If you have a bigger party, you're generally doing better with things unless you intentionally try to build that fortune pool up.
So does that eliminate the need for the prototypical bard type of class, and so everybody can kind of
no, there
out?
actually is a bard, the artisan, which is kind of a mage bard analog. Basically, what artisans are is they study the artifacts of man. And they learn about them and teach other people about what they've learned about humanity and the old ones. And so if you they can get what's called focus, which basically is your magic wand or it's a strange ball, but they're objects that don't have any obvious purpose. But the dogs have studied them and realized that there are certain effects they can do. So like I push this button, it shoots fireballs. Okay, well now I have that spell, fireball. But they're also about trying to help other people and encourage them because they've learned from studying humanities things that we all work together best if we continue to study this together. So one of the things I did is that rather than every time you go up a level you get a specific power, you can choose. There's almost like a tree. So when you start off as an artist, you can pick encouragement or focus magic. So you can pick really good focus on being spells or being more encouraging and bard-like. And then as you go on, you pick different tricks or evolve those current tricks and emphasize them based on how you want to spend your levels. So it's entirely possible to play a magic user and never cast spells. You can go very much kind of down the bard route. With the guardian, their emphasis is strength and charisma. So you can go pure combat. I am a warrior of a dog, or you can play much more the leader type, where it's like I need you to go over here and you go over here and play a tactician and playing up the charisma side as opposed to the strength side.
Yeah, I never played any emphasis on charisma, and then
unless you're a paladin.
Well, then I actually looked at some of the skill aptitude. Well, actually, I got my one skill is persuade, which of course you need charisma for. I'm like, but
hello, Boulder's Gate.
Your comment about trying it's okay to fail early for like bigger payoffs later. Craig actually basically summed it up as the Indiana Jones rule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, that's actually really important, is because Indiana Jones does stem from, I think, the same kind of inspiration. That it comes from pulp era, this kinds of 20s, 30s, 40s style of writing, which was very much about getting knocked down and standing back up, knocked down and standing back up. And so some of those things like the Fafhrd Mouser stories were inspirational when I was working on this, because they also have a lot of Fafhrd the Grey Mouser fights, and as a result of that fight, bad things happen, and then they get in the worst situation, worst trouble, then they work together and they get out of it. So it is very much the that style of storytelling that I'm drawing some inspiration from.
Speaking of inspiration, I saw that you listed a bunch of different things that you
Inspired
by, and one of them actually hit home, especially for me, because I basically read almost every single book written by this guy, and that is the Redwall series. I loved the Redwall series until the very end, and then it's just kind of like, it's kind of getting the same.
Well, interestingly, I didn't know anything about it when I started working on this. I had never heard of it. It was not even on radar, and I started talking about it. Oh, it's like Redwall, and I'm like, okay. And I kept working at this. I was like, no, it's like Redwall. I'm like, and like so many people mentioned the Redwall. Like, I gotta look into this. So I've not chanced to read any of the novels, but I have seen some of the cartoons from Canada, which I understand are not nearly as good. But I can certainly see why people are drawn to that, and that's why I added this inspiration. Because since I started watching that and reading up about it and hearing about it, I certainly drew inspiration from why people saw the connection. And it's like, and the idea that, particularly the idea of the dynastic elements, where it's like, that one character goes through his novel, and then a couple months later you're talking about his son and his adventures. And that's something that I wanted to have potential for in Pugmire, where he's, like, for example, I have level 10 cap. At level 10, you become an old dog and you can't learn any more tricks. The idea is that you can then potentially play that dog's puppies, and those puppies go off an adventure, and so you start over again. But they pass down the artifacts of man from father to son, so you can get some of the equipment you earned from your previous character because of that dynastic inheritance, which I thought was something that, again, not in the core book, but something that I really want to emphasize is a possibility, because I think it could potentially be interesting. Okay, now my last dog was an Afghan, and he was a guardian, and so maybe his son didn't really take to being a guardian and decided to become an artisan instead. So it's like, now I've inherited a sword that I can't really use very well, because I want more about magic. I mean, so you can play with those things if you want to, or you can just be like, I am the son of my father, and I do the same thing my father did or my mother did, and really just kind of play a slightly different version of each of those and try a slightly different build based on the last time you did. Because again, you can pick those tricks in the orders to go, maybe, like in your case, maybe we'll play a charisma-based guardian and play into that more.
That actual mechanic reminds me of a PC game called Rogue Legacy, where you play until your character dies, and basically all your items get passed on to your heir, and then it gives you a random selection of classes you can be. There's a chance that you could choose the same class, but there's also chances that you could have a different class to kind of expand your experience. So let's go and talk about your experience as with this Kickstarter campaign that's kind of, in my opinion, gone awesomely, crazily perfect.
Taking off just a little.
Yes. Yep. I mean, it's no 7C, but I mean, it's doing really well.
What I find interesting is, if you look, I was looking yesterday at like what you pulled in, and I think it was something like 50 people, like out of 1,400 givers or backers, like 50 people gave $5, 3 people gave $10, and everybody else was $20 or more.
Yeah,
which I found surprising. Look, compared to other Kickstarters, and you kind of have an idea like what drove people to like automatically get to that bar of $20.
Well, first of all, I do have to give credit where credit is due. One of the reasons why I'm doing Pugmire through Path Publishing is because the fact that, I mentioned before, Rich Thomas has done 19 of these, this is his 20th, and he's learned so much about doing Kickstarter. And so a lot of times I would go, Rich, I have this idea, and he'd be like, here's this reason why it's terrible, and why you should do this instead. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense, let's do that. But one of the things that I was very passionate early on that he agreed with was having the early access available. Because I know I've been on a number of Kickstarters where I've been burned. And either it never happens, or the game's completely different from what I thought it was going to be. And now I'm in. It's like, it's already passed. My money's committed, and it's like, this isn't the game I wanted, or this game's never showing up. So one of the things that I thought was important was to have a game that was pretty much playable out of the box. It's very much inspired by the Steam model of, here's the game. It's not complete. It's not all there. It's going to have some bugs. It's got some slight rough edges, but you can play it.
Right.
And at least that's what you're putting money in. And so one thing I've seen a lot of is that people will back it like $5, then download the PDF. I'm guessing download the PDF. I don't see what happens, but like they'll back $5, and then like a day or two later it goes up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because they're looking at it and go, oh, this is actually here, and it's not only can they play it and read it, and it's also for people at home. It's this is like this is art. I mean, this is not just a Word file. This has.
It looks pretty.
I think it's like 120 pages.
Yeah, I mean, and so I mean, we did a full layout as if this were a full product.
Yep.
And so people were looking at that, and so it's like, not only can I see the game, but also I see that this is close to done already.
Mm-hmm.
There's an amount of faith. It's like, okay, this is a brand new game from at least one company people never heard of before. But there's some trust. Like, okay, this game's actually real. It's going to potentially happen and come out and be a real thing. And so I think that there's that kind of, I'm not sure about this. Oh, there's art and there's layout and it's edited and it's been tested. It's just missing a few chunks, and they spell out which chunks it's missing. It's very clear. Oh, but I'll go ahead and commit to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm showing that we're very far along. And that's also, but still it's early enough that people can still get that excitement of chance to contribute to this brand new world.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly people have been very vocal, just extremely positive, but also with ideas. And a lot of them are like just kind of fun. I'm going to take my dog and I'm going to play my dog as a ratter and it's going to be awesome. And other people, it's like, no, I want to play wombats because I had a pet wombat once when I was 12 and that's not represented. I mean, so there's lots of enthusiasm,
right?
But also because people feel like they can actually make a stamp on this. They can. I mean, there's certainly the ability to direct and shift this in a way that's not possible for a completely done game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not so early that people are just like, I don't even know what this is,
mm-hmm.
to be able to even have a meaningful conversation.
Right.
I'm curious. You have a lot of stretch goals. Did you already have those set up when you started the Kickstarter?
We
like,
came up
oh my gosh.
No, we actually started off with 25 initially, and then in the back end we have a few more that have since come up that we're thinking about.
Okay.
But we came into this with a bit of a plan. Granted, I also thought we'd be at this point like about a week and a half before the end, not like a week and a half in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely much faster than I expected. But and things like the fiction anthology, that was pretty much right off the bat we knew we were going to do. The cards was something that actually we were prototyping before the Kickstarter began.
The cards sound really cool.
Because I mean, I know like it's easier for me to kind of have all my powers on little cards. One thing I loved about 4th edition D&D that people deride it, but I think that I would like to they had the cards because it made it easier to kind of go, okay, well here's my thing, like, I know what I'm doing. And having nice laminate cards, especially with drive-through cards and their print-on-demand services, are fantastic to do high-quality stuff. Mm-hmm. So we knew that was pretty simple. And then the audio drama was something that I was particularly keen to do because when I'm not working on Pugsteady, I'm also the executive producer for a new company called Earplay. Mm-hmm. And their goal is to make interactive audio drama. And so over the past couple of years, I've gotten to know a lot of voice actors, a lot of audio people, and I know that I'm a huge fan of podcasts and companies like Big Finish that do audio drama. Mm-hmm. And there's a certain kind of a closeness you can get by doing an audio drama, and it's also, from a new company standpoint, much cheaper to produce audio drama than like a cartoon or a video or something else. So it was a way to do something that felt like professional level drama in a new medium besides fiction without spending a whole lot of cash to be able to do it. And also I had access to some amazingly talented people that I think could be very exciting for that.
Okay, stupid question, but what is audio drama?
Audio drama, as opposed to an audio book, mm-hmm. Where you have one narrator reading the entire book, audio drama is where each part is cast by a different actor and you have sound effects in, and it's written and performed as if there's no narrator, or sometimes there's a little bit of narrator. So like the old radio plays, like old time, mm-hmm. like Sherlock Holmes and Superman radio dramas. They've been really coming back recently with podcasting. And I mentioned Big Finish, but they have been doing Doctor Who based audio dramas for I think over a decade, 15 years now. Wow. So I mean, it's a way to kind of something that's close to like a television show, but it's all just purely audio.
Cool.
You know, I've actually played an audio drama, and for the life of me, I cannot remember what the heck it was called. It was like a spy one.
Codename Cygnus?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Reactive Studio, which was the company that I became Earplay. So it's the same people. I actually backed that Kickstarter is how I met them because I was like, this is really awesome, and they're like, okay, cool. Do you want to come on board? It's like, really? So, but that's exactly what we're trying to do. Is that the game talks to you and sets up a scenario, and then you talk back to it and say what you want to do.
Yep.
And one of the stretch goals that we announced right before this was doing exactly that for Pugmire as a possibility.
I, of course, was playing, excuse me, I was listening to the audio drama in places I wasn't supposed to be listening to things. I was supposed to be working, so I had to keep my auditory responses to a minimum and just had to tap the answer on my phone.
Nice.
I was like, go in the other room.
And we do have that option.
What the hell is he talking about?
And Craig makes a good point about the interaction. I was looking at like Craig says, I was looking at the Kickstarter comments and how much response there is from the makers of Pugmire, such as yourself, when people are asking you questions. You know, some Kickstarters you go on and who knows where the producers are or the publishers? We don't know. Or somebody asks a question, bam, there's an answer. You guys don't kid around.
Certainly, we it's actually a huge, not huge team. It's 4 people, counting myself, but I mean, it's a great team. It's me, Rich Thomas, Ian Watson's doing our social media, and then Rose Bailey is helping logistics of it. And so having several people able to watch it and chip in has been immensely helpful for that kind of response. And but I think on the flip side,
responses.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not like real quick, like, yes, we're working on it. You know, it actually has depth. It actually shows that you're all 4 of you guys are actually thinking about your responses before just slamming your hand against the keyboard going, there you go.
Yes, that is awesome.
Yes.
But on the flip side, one thing I have to say is because we have 312 comments already, and I have been tangentially involved with other Kickstarters, not as a driving force, but as just like one of the writers or creators on a project. And just top to bottom, this has been one of the best communities so far. I mean, it's a brand new community, but everyone has been extremely enthusiastic. Everyone's been very supportive. There's been a couple of people who are very passionate about very specific subjects, but that no one's been cruel or mean. You know, no one's been like, this is stupid, I hate this. There's been lots of, I really want this thing, and I'm very excited.
I really want my cats in the game.
That's a very big one. It's like, we want cats in the core game, and well, I mean, there's been lots of
new stretch goal, 200,000. Huh? 200,000 stretch goal.
Well, I mean, we do have plans, but focuses on dogs.
Right. Well, I mean,
I'm just kidding.
I'm looking at the Kickstarter on the other computer real quick here, and basically y'all have already surpassed the 130,000 one.
For art, yeah.
Yeah, you're 143, so it's not a far-fetched idea that your fiction anthology edition featuring Aaron Rosenberg is well within the realms of possibilities, which would all this. I think the thing is that not to be mean to a lot of the Kickstarter people out there that run their own campaigns and whatnot, but to me it seems like each one of your stretch goals has this unique and interesting aspect to it that drives people. It's not just well, we're going to add one more character into the game that you get to interact with, and so you're kind of just like, well, what does that mean? Is this a person I'm going to meet once? Is this going to be a party member? With the way that your stretch goals are, you're adding to the anthology. You're adding cards. You have an audio drama. You're adding it to Roll20. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that a lot of people can quickly understand and grasp, and understand really what that goal is actually accomplishing.
Right, and that was one of the things that when Rich and I brainstormed the initial stretch goals, one of the things we kept going is like, how does this improve the experience, or how does this grow the Pugmire brand? How does this make Pugmire available to people who can't play in this game? And so, but I mean, also sometimes it's just a chance to work with really cool people. I mean, like the you scroll past it, but the interactive audio drama.
Come on, Charlotte.
170,000. I'm getting a chance to work with Dave Grossman, and this is a guy who was one of the writers on Secret of Monkey Island. This is one of the guys who was instrumental in LucasArts and Telltale. He wrote for amazing games like The Wolf Among Us and Tales of the Deadlands, Tales of the Borderlands, and he's interested in working on Pugmire on this. And so it's like I would love for a chance to work with Dave. Aaron Rosenberg is a fantastic writer. He's worked on a number of Star Trek novels, a number of time novels for Eureka. He's a fantastic writer, and we've always every Gen Con it's like we should get together on a project, and now finally we have the chance. And so whenever it's like a chance to get these amazing things that enhance people's enjoyment of the world, because that's the other thing is a lot of Kickstarters I've seen where they misstep is that they make this amazing brand new world or this amazing new concept, and then the stretch goals don't really build more on the thing that's actually being sold.
Right.
Like with Pugmire, there's a lot of possibility for additional source book materials or adventures or whatnot, and I think we will get to those in the stretch goals. I think those are still viable, but people are coming to this because of the world. They're excited about the potential for the world, and so what a lot of stretch goals you see will expand the world. Here's more stories about the world. Here's a way to listen about the world. Here's a way to interact with the world in a different way besides the game. Here's cards that help you at the table to get to get the mechanics down faster, so you can get back to focusing on the game. There's more artwork to show you more details about the world. So a lot of these things are how can we make the experience at the table better, and then how can we make your enjoyment of the world deeper. And it seems to be working. It seems people are really gravitating to that. I get to learn more about this and try new things.
I think something's very important here. And we've talked many times on the podcast about Kickstarters, and what we've seen, especially in the video game side, is a Kickstarter, kind of in your case, they exceed expectations. Like, oh shit, we need stretch goals now.
Right.
And, now they're trying to come up with stretch goals, in a week, whereas you've obviously thought very far ahead about this. Okay, if we get to this, what's going to happen? Instead of flying by the seat of your pants. And that preparation going into a Kickstarter, really, what are we going to do when this happens? I think it's key here, and that's what's getting people really interested.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that it's unique about crowdfunding that a lot of other projects don't have to worry about is you have this weird confluence of marketing and budget. Because really what stretch goals are is in their form of marketing. It's like, there's this new thing that we want to get people excited about, so more people will donate money to it.
Right.
So it's you have to present things that people are excited about. But I've seen so many Kickstarters, like you mentioned, where they put these amazing stretch goals out and then they go bankrupt. Or they just can't fulfill them because they've overpromised so much.
Double Fine Adventures.
I wasn't going to mention any names.
Well, if anyone's watched, if anyone's attended any of our talks, because we do a panel called The Destruction of the Game Industry as We Know It, Double Fine Adventures is one that we definitely hit on every single time.
That's fair. But on the flip side, I will offer Harebrained Studios. I think does a great job with this, with Shadowrun Returns, with Shadowrun Hong Kong, now with BattleTech, is they bring very sustainable goals that are also very interesting in and of themselves. Like, we're going to add this additional mission and add this kind of content. We're going to focus on this character and give them another run, or we're going to focus on this mech and give more interesting components to that. And so they do a very good job of, like you say, planning out what they want to do and think things through. And so that's one of the things that we did with this was like, let's figure out everything we could possibly do and figuring out how that builds the core game in a way that's sustainable. Certainly, I went into this thinking, okay, if we get $15,000 and that's all we do, great. I'll basically write the game myself. We'll get some art, we'll put the book out, and then it was fun. Let's do it again. But then I was like, okay, if we hit X number of stretch goals, I'm going to have to start hiring people because I can't do this all myself. Because I've got, my Earplay work and my Futurama work and all this other stuff, so I don't have time. So, okay, I need to be able to hire other people, and how much is that going to cost me both in time as well as money? And how is that going to impact delivering the core product, the core Pugmire product?
Right.
So each of these is like going, I have to extend it in a way that makes sense. And so, like, for example, with the cats, you're going back to that, but
it's never going away.
I want the Monarchies to be a separate, distinct game.
Okay.
I feel like there are so many cat fans. I've been owned by cats myself. I know that is the correct relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
But and I feel like there's so much potential and depth for their game, and the rules should reflect that style of gameplay. In my head, I have ideas of like, where dogs, it's I have powers that give other people stuff. In cats, it's like, I give everyone stuff, but I give myself a little bit more, which kind of reflects that different dynamic a little bit.
Right.
And I think the rules need to actually change on a base level. I think the way it's compatible with the two games, but I think that how the powers work and how some of the things like fortune work need to reflect that different style of play and that different aesthetic, because the monarchies of Mao are much more like a mix of Renaissance Italy and Prussia. It's very kind of a face culture, a little bit of Japan too. It's like honor and dignity, and it's not about it's about personal respect and dueling, and those kinds of elements. There's a little more not player versus player, but certainly tension that is not present in the dog game. But on the flip side, the cats, have a lot more options because they have those alliances and allegiances they can draw on, and they have this honor code. So all of that, I think, needs to be reflected in the mechanics. So it needs to be a distinct game. And so when people I think if we'd gone into this unplanned, it would have been very simple to go, oh sure, we'll throw in a cat source book, and that would have been end up being a disservice to that particular portion of the world. So by going to the plan and saying no, standing firm, we do want to do a complete stick cat. Once this is all done, the dogs have had their day, as it were. We can then move on and do a separate, very cool thing about cats, and really get tons of great cat arts and focus on that and show lots of cat relationships and their dialogue and how their stories look, and maybe even do their own anthologies and their own audio drama if we go that route.
That'd make him a very happy man.
I never thought about that with the stretch goals. It's almost like the distinction of what adds on to the core game for stretch goals versus what's something you can do down the road to basically be like in addition to it. I think it's a very important distinction here, which makes a whole lot of sense that I would never, if I was thinking of doing Kickstarter, I would have never thought of that.
Well, and that's the advantage that I have of working with people who've done this for so long, is because Onyx Path has learned a ton from this. And also, I've learned a lot just watching my peers also, because it's not just Onyx Path. I've watched how Evil Hat does theirs and talked with their guys and how they put things together. I've talked with people like Binance Studios and how they do their Kickstarters. I've talked with some video game people and how they do their Kickstarters, and even just things like how the Pebble Watch did theirs, how Exploding Cats did theirs. These incredible Mystery Science Theater, I thought was a brilliant campaign because Joel came in with a very distinct plan. It was very obvious. It was up front. It's like, here's exactly my plan, and here's exactly where all that money is going to, and here's why those stretch goals are the way they are. And they had some small ones in the middle, like, if we hit by this date, we'll do this extra thing, but they're all clearly sustainable. It was like, we'll give you an extra classic episode because he already has those resources available.
Right.
Or I'll reveal this information a little bit earlier than I would plan to, because either way, the information is getting out. So he was very creative, making choices that he could sustain himself as a creator and as a producer, but still make people excited about the campaign itself, because it is an event. The other part that people miss, I think, is that a lot of people look at Kickstarter like a bank loan.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, in 30 days, I get cash and make stuff. But it's an event. It's a chance to build a community, or ideally, increase an existing community.
Right.
And get them excited about the thing. And so, again, we're back to that. It's both marketing and budgeting and production. And you have to kind of balance those two. And the only way you can really do it is either make the mistakes, or to look at people who have made those mistakes and go, okay, why did this not work? Why did this work? So being an active part of Kickstarter, I think, is a big part of doing a successful Kickstarter.
So I know that there's probably a lot of people out there asking, so now that we've talked a lot about Pugmire, where can we actually see Pugmire in action? Are you going to be running any more tests at conventions this year? Or?
I'm definitely going to be running it after the Kickstarter. So there are a couple stages of it. I am going to be doing an online game with the Gentleman Gamer, who travels on YouTube. He's doing a game. He's running it for me so I can play, which is novel. It's like, oh, I get to play my own game. That never happens. But he's going to be doing an online character creation session, and then we're going to be doing an online game. I think me and two other people who won a contest for his channel. So it's going to be 3 of us playing for a short game online, so people will be able to see that. A number of other people, people that have video channels as well as people who do audio podcasts, have talked about they may record their games and put them online so we can actual play. So we're hoping to have a couple of examples of play during the course of the Kickstarter, so people who can't get a group together to play early access can at least see how it's being played. Aside from that, I also have some conventions. The most 2 immediate ones I think of is Cleveland Concoction. Which I'm sad to say, you guys mentioned this last week, is the exact same weekend as AndoCon. So I'm not going to be at AndoCon this year, unfortunately. Although I did run it last year.
Yeah.
I've already told Ando he's devastated and
He is absolutely
has
devastated.
sworn blood oath against me, and I respect that.
Actually, after he
That's
learned
something
about that, he hasn't come back on the show. He can't.
Wow.
He can't.
He's a
can't handle
broken
it.
man. I can't do it anymore. I
You really have an
can't
effect
take
on people. I think.
Are you going back to Gen Con?
Yes, I'm going to Gen Con, and in fact, the Wrecking Crew is going to be running a bunch of sessions of Pugmire there. One thing we're talking about, we don't have details nailed down, is that we're going to also try to have in-booth demos of some of the games, including Pugmire. So people who can't sign up for one of the longer games will have like short, like 5-minute demonstrations and maybe some hour-long short games. Like here's the pre-gens, let's do a couple encounters, and go. I'm trying to think what else. There's also a convention in Texas in April, which sadly the name is escaping me at the moment. I have a lot of cons. I'm going to GDC, so I'm doing a little bit of talking about it there. Yeah, it's on my website, eddyfate.com, eddyfate.com. I have my schedule of all my appearances, but basically if I'm going to be there, I either have plans to run Pugmire through the con, or I'll probably have the rules with me and at least show people what it looks like.
Cool.
So okay, so I guess the next question is, so after the Kickstarter, after you've gotten to do what you want to do with Pugmire, what's next for Pugsteady?
I drink.
That sounds good.
Nerdburger, awesome.
Craig said, I'm going to make a point to mention Pugmire on Nerdburger podcast this weekend with Ando.
Nice.
Yes.
You're going to kill him. You're going to kill him.
Tell Ando what he's missing.
Yeah.
Because he goes, I gave Ando a chance to play Pugmire last year at AndoCon. And he's like, no, I got other things I got to do. I don't want to play this game with Sean Fannin, which is much more interesting than your stupid game. And now I'm not going to be there this year.
Man.
And so Ando
missed out.
Man, he just missed out.
I think you two need to have, like, what was the old, like, MTV Battle Royal show?
Oh, Celebrity Deathmatch?
Yes,
Yeah.
it sounds like that's what's coming.
Except no celebrity, no deathmatch. Well, but I mean, after that also...
You're two celebrities to me.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But I mean, the actual plan is that Kickstarter's going to end. I'm going to be at Concoction, then I'm going to go to GDC. But when I get back from that, we're basically going to sit down, look at what we've actually committed to, look at the budget we actually have, and then start planning from there. From my perspective, everything stems from this book, ultimately. We need to get this book done first. I'm probably going to look at a handful, maybe 1 or 2 people to help me out with from writing side of it. Obviously, we're going to look at some more art because we've committed to a whole bunch of new art. See if the artists that I've already worked on this are available again, especially like, Claudio Pleos and Johnny Hodgson. They're both fantastic artists that worked on this. I'd love to work with them again. In fact, Claudio did
I love that
one here.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, working with some of these great artists again would be great. But then once that book is done, I'm happy with it. Maybe put some material out for the backers to review. If I kick some things around the tires, test this bit real quick.
Right.
Then once that's kind of in queue, then I'll go with things like the anthology, the audio drama. And to be fair, I probably will start some of the initial design of the interactive audio drama early, just because that can be a little compartmentalized. But really, it's going to be lots of getting things in order, getting things in place, and seeing what we can do. I mean, if there's a chance for, like, I can hire, like, bigger name actors for audio dramas, like some people who've done a lot of video game work, I would like to explore that if the money makes sense, if we can do that.
Right.
If there's money to, get the anthology into more and more places than just an ebook, we can explore that. But because I have a ton of people ask me, it's like, I want to work on this, I want to work on that, and work with you. It's like, it's great, but I can't make any of those decisions until it's done. I need to know exactly how much money I have, because, again, I've seen so many Kickstarters where it's like, we're going to get started on this right now, and then it turns out that was actually a bad choice because that money was needed someplace else to help with another piece. So it comes down to, okay, getting the thing we agreed to, the thing that everyone's backing, can we get the core book done in a good place, into people's hands, in a timely fashion. Once all those questions are green lights across the board, look at everything else and everything committed to and figure out what makes sense for there. And here's the bare minimum we can approve. Oh, well, we have a little extra cash. Maybe we'll hire, a couple more stories, or maybe, get a little more art, or, we'll add extra 20 minutes onto the audio drama. So, random things. I mean, we won't know until we have the cash.
I didn't actually put this one on the whatever the title bar at the bottom, but
The box.
So I understand that Pugmire is your main focus, but I'm assuming that there's moments where you just need a slight step back.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, what is it that Eddy does when he does that slight step back from Pugmire to like refresh?
Well, the actual answer is do different work because I'm working like 60 hours a week most weeks. Because like right now, as I mentioned, I'm one of the writers for a future on my Game of Drones, and so that's going to be launching soon. I don't know if I can say when, but so there's a lot of like we need to get stuff done for that. So that's a big focus.
Yeah.
But I mean, when I actually just decompress and like I'm done, I'm still working in a lot of ways because I mean it's fun. I play Steam games and I deconstruct them and think about how they're put together. Because I'm still heavily involved in the video game industry. That is an amazing picture of a cat that I don't know if anyone can see.
I'm gonna pull it up over here.
Yeah, well, while you're doing that, I also like look at I was the audio drama. I watch TV. I go to cons. I talk to people. It's weird because like I love what I do, and so from one perspective, I'm always working. I'm always playing games. I'm always writing. I'm always reading. I'm always doing research. So a lot of things that I do for fun that I can also say is research. But I mean, I'm also starting to do things like I'm teaching myself how to cook. Learning how to cook.
Useful skill in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's I've never cooked. I'm 40 years old. Finally, maybe I should figure out how to actually feed myself. That would be nice.
Yeah.
Beer.
I enjoy travel. I mean, there's lots of other things I enjoy doing. DDP yoga. I mean, stuff like that. So.
Real quick, here's the cat picture that we're talking about. It's amazing.
It's very distinguished.
I'm gonna have to resize it real quick, but
just put it over Eddy's head.
Right.
Look at that.
Nice.
Interestingly, this artist, who is it? Oh, Ian Blither, excellent. This artist was one I saw very early on when I was working on Pugmire, and was very influential in my vision for the Monarchies of Mal. It's I want to say Ukrainian artist.
Oh wow.
But he does all these kind of military portraits with different cat heads. There's this amazing one that's like he has a turban on, and has this great kind of button Russian coat, and there's this one with the kind of ornate almost Italian or Spanish style, and immediately I was like, oh, this is the Monarchies of Mal. This because again that kind of blend of fashion and class with military bearing that I just thought was so interesting and compelling. So it's a great picture, but it's also actually is one of the references, inspirations I used when I was developing the cats.
Awesome.
So I'm curious. So you're doing playtest for Pugmire. So obviously probably like good and bad things happen in terms of gameplay. How do you kind of trying to think how to phrase it. How do you know when something works well or doesn't work well when you're doing a gameplay test with other people to go back and fix?
It's such a good question. Because I've been on both sides of good and bad playtests, and I think one of the worst playtests you can do is just tell me what happens. Because you're gonna get a whole bunch of random information. Granted, I do that now I'm doing it now for early access, but also early access is pretty far down the road. So I do want the random information at this stage because I know there's gonna be stuff that I haven't paid attention to. I want the stuff like if you put this power with this power and you add this component, you destroy the world. Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Thanks for pointing it out. I should make that not happen. But when I'm doing the playtests, like the alpha and early beta playtests I did, excuse me, I always go with the game plan. I always go in, okay, these are the things that I want to make sure are working right.
Yep.
And I don't think that you can really playtest a game until you know what your game is supposed to be. In my case, I had a one-sentence statement that was, this is what Pugmire is. It is I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's a family-friendly game about cooperation and action based on old-school fantasy rules.
Okay.
And so it's like, if there's anything in the game that's invalidating that core sentence, it needs to change. That was the turban, because that's the turban picture that I was talking about. If you want to put that one up. So when you're doing a playtest, there's two different kinds of playtests. There's system playtests. Yes, this is the cat I was talking about with the turban, the kind of full coat, which is amazing.
And there's wow, look at that one.
Yeah.
That looks dangerous. Don't screw with me, man.
So this is amazing, amazing.
I'll bite your fingers off.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So if you have a kind of a system playtest where it's like, okay, let's just go through a bunch of combats and make sure the combat system is working the way I want to. But then there's a holistic playtest where it's like, okay, start to finish, is this working the way I want to? And the way to tell is like, are players reacting the way that you want to? Because ultimately, when you're designing a game, you're crafting an experience.
Right.
You want people to experience the game a certain way and to react a certain way. You don't force them in a channel. You want to encourage them to go on the channel by themselves. Because everyone hates railroading. Everyone hates, it's like, the invisible walls where, okay, there's this wide open field in the video game space, but everything else is a wall next to this one road. Everyone hates that. But if it's the, Lego games do this really well. It's like there's all these little tabs that you fall down, and you collect those tabs, and it leads you towards, I want those things.
Yep.
Right.
And then you end up in a space where the game designer wants you to be. And that's where good game design goes. It encourages you to go the way. So if you're playtesting it, and players are not reacting the way it is, okay, why is that? And usually you can pretty quickly narrow it down to a system. In fact, this is how the fortune system was designed, because I had originally a much more common, everyone gets hero points and whatnot, and players were always wanting to give each other stuff. And I'm like, why am I getting in their way? And so originally I had a rule for, okay, they can trade it, or there's a certain cost for trading it. And finally I was like, no, let's just put it into a bowl and see what happens. And then that worked out much better, because then it was, if I take a stumble, you can benefit down the road. And players started inherently playing in that way because of the way the game. But also, especially for role-playing games, it's really hard to divorce mechanics and setting. There's always the kind of things that you can play in a role-playing game for your rules. I don't think that's completely true. I think it's mostly true. But I think that the rules and the setting do have to coexist. And again, with Pugmire, I was like, I wanted to encourage people to cooperate. And I had some vague ideas, but I wanted to kind of test a fairly vanilla system first. But people really gravitated to the be a good dog part of the code of man. It became a rallying cry. It became a reason for dogs to talk, and became a watchword. And so by having those words in their head and in front of them as part of the game world, they were more inclined to be good dogs. They were more inclined to do good things in a way, to be heroic in a way that a lot of other role-playing games almost have to force the players to act and tell them you're playing it bad unless you're being a hero. I mean, you've read a lot of role-playing games. It's like, heroes do this, heroes do that. Please, Lord God, be a hero. But because I have a setting where it's like going, no, be a good dog. It's like, I should be a good dog. Yeah, that's what good dogs do. And so they started naturally on that channel. So I wanted to take other stuff out of their way. It's like, that's where they want to go. So let's take the stuff in the system that's stopping them from doing that and give them a reward for doing more of that. And that's where a lot of the core loop of game design happens. It's like, figure out where your players want to go, give them reasons to go there, take stuff out of the way that stops them from going there. And that's a good chunk of game design.
So I think one of the biggest questions for any game designer out there is, how do you control the, potential fear of, this is my baby, I've been working on it, and I'm giving it out into the world, and maybe people either interpret it or play it differently than you envisioned?
You suck it up and you deal with it. Because I have certainly seen people run my games, and they've invited me to play, and I played them, and then I had to go, because it's like, you're clearly having fun, but I'm going to stab some people because I might want to go. But the reality is I try to think of it a lot like doing something like a television series, or even painting a painting. Because if you're experiencing non-interactive arts or non-interactive entertainment, you can't tell the audience what to think. They're going to come away with it.
Right.
And they're going to have their own opinions on it. And that may or may not match up to what the writers or the producers were anticipating. Like, if you look at a lot of the early communications between fans and writers for shows like Lost, Lost is a very different way of where they're usually going, and they end up kind of leaning into what the fans expected. I think a little bit's their detriment, but I mean, ultimately, the fans shaped where they were going, because the fans were like, this is what the show is, and no, it's not what we're making. But at a certain level, when you are a creator, whether it's a game designer or an artist, that's going to happen. That's part of the process, and that's a good thing. For games specifically, or any interactive medium, you're also at a remove, because What you're doing is you're crafting the tools to make experience, and the players come in and take those tools and make their own experience from that. And so not only do you have that natural kind of distance between a viewer and artist, but also you have a piece in the middle that is the only piece that each of you are touching on. So I can't even tell you this is what the dogs did and how they do it and why they do it. I can only tell you, here's some stuff that makes dogs do things, and you go, my dogs go over here and do this thing. It's like, that's awful, but you're having fun. So, and that's the thing is that as a designer, you have to at some point come to terms with either A, people just aren't going to understand what you're doing with your game, and you have to come to terms with that. Or B, you force them into your understanding of the game, which is going to make them resent that. So, like, Pugmire's for example is I don't think it is a funny game. I think it is lighthearted. I think there's certainly potential for humor. And I've leaned into that humor because, I don't know about you guys, but when my gaming group is, they can't go 5 minutes without cracking a joke. So it's like, you might as well, here's all the dog puns you can have. Enjoy them because, you know, in 3 hours, you're going to be crying over someone's funeral because that's the kind of game I run. I run games that are very kind of, that's really funny, wait a minute. A perfect example, the adventure at Midwinter Gaming Convention in Milwaukee, I ran some games there. And the long adventure short, one of the pieces of it was that one of the dogs had a cat valet, a cat servant, and he was arrested, ultimately for the crime of being a cat. And so they spent the entire adventure on trying to get this cat, you know, freed, and there's a nefarious conspiracy. But at the end, one of the players came to me, he's like, that was a game about racial profiling, wasn't it? And it's like, yes, it was. And I think that this is a game that has the potential for that depth. But I also know, as a designer, that a lot of people are going to go, I'm a Wyvern with an axe, woo! Boom, that's the beginning, middle, and end of what they're going to do for the game. And that's awesome. I think that's great that they can do that. I want to make sure that they have the ability to do that. But if they want to go deeper, the potential for depth is there. So you can't tell people you're playing the game wrong. What you can say is, here's all the possibilities for my game. I design it and play it at this level, but there's all these different levels above it or on the sides of it that you can engage on if you want to. Vampire the Masquerade is where I learned a lot of this on, is because, you know, everyone talks about vampires, this great sensual game of personal horror, but there are noteworthy number of people, myself included at times, who play it as superheroes with fangs. Sometimes I really enjoy that style of gameplay. And so it's like, it's great that my girlfriend's dead and I'm low on blood and I'm turning into a monster, but really I'm going to punch that guy in the face until he explodes. And some people really want to play that, and so I'm telling them that they're playing it wrong means it goes, well, then your game is stupid, I'll play something else. I'll go play Pathfinder or whatever. So instead it's saying, cool, I'm glad you're really enjoying that. Here are some more resources to help you play with that. But a good chunk of our game design is actually over here in this space. Feel free to have fun over here, but we're going to continue to go in this direction. And the same thing with Pugmire is like, you know, certainly the humor is going to always be there, and the dog jokes and the cat jokes and all those things are going to be there. But if people are going to bring a lot of that to the table themselves, I don't have to provide that. I can focus on some of the interesting political intrigue and religious connotations and some of the deeper potentiality for that. And people will go, well, that's cool, but I want to kill zombies. Here are the zombies. You know, feel free and enjoy your game, and you will have a hell of a lot of fun. And I think I'm glad that you're enjoying yourself. So it comes down to the only way as a designer you can measure success is, are people enjoying it? And if they're enjoying it, then you can't ultimately say you're enjoying it wrong. All you can say is they're having a good time with something you've created.
Out of curiosity, how long have you been working on Pugmire?
I've been working on it pretty consistently for a little over a year. I've been working it off and on for two and a half years. Basically, I wrote a short story because my dogs drive me crazy. I had 2 pugs at the time, and we were in a one-room apartment. And my main laptop had died, so all I had was a Chromebook. And the dogs were barking at everything. It's like, you know, someone made a noise outside. Bark, 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 bark. There's a fly in the mall. Bark, 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 bark. Nothing's happening. Bark, 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 bark. I'm bored. Bark, 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 bark. And it's like, shut up. And so just to keep myself sane, I started writing a story about dogs barking at invisible demons. And, you know, because I'm a huge nerd, they had swords and axes and magic.
Of course.
Because why not? And then I went back to it like a couple months later. I was like, there's actually something here. So I showed it to a couple of friends. And I'm like, yeah, you should do that. And so I played around with some, D&D stuff. The idea of, okay, here's 3 pages of rules of doing dogs in D&D. That was like what I figured it would be. And then I was approached to do an anthology, and I was like, I wanted something different than just, yet another. I mean, I love writing noir, crime, and horror stories, but I was like, I want to try something different. I've done a lot of those recently. And so I found this old story, and that story didn't work, but I made a whole new story using those characters, which became The Winter of Man, which was in the Sojourn anthology volume 2. And I showed that to a bunch of beta readers like I usually do. And they were all like, you have to do more with this. Oh my God, this is amazing. And I was like, oh, that's very nice of you. And then like a few of them were like, no, seriously, when are you going to do more of this?
Right.
I will thug a person if you're going to get more of this stuff. And so they became very, very passionate. It's like, whenever you do the role-playing game, not if, when you do the role-playing game, we'll be there. And I'm just like, I'm not doing a role-playing. I guess I'm doing a role-playing game, right? Some of it was, benevolent bullying. But a lot of it was, I think, that the world ended up being a place where a lot of bits and pieces of ideas I've had for like most of my life I could put in. For example, I've always had an idea of doing a Wodehouse, Jeeves and Wooster style pastiche in fantasy setting. And I just never get it to work from a typical genre fantasy D&D style setting. Just never seemed to work right. And then Pugmire's like, perfect, boom! You have the comedy of that dynamic. Makes a lot of sense in a slightly lighthearted world. Lots of things like, I always wanted to do a Thunderheart Barbarian style game. Well, boom, here's, Pugmire. It works perfectly for that stuff. So a lot of these bits and pieces that were in my head now all gelled together and made sense. And so in some respects, I'm working on it for a chunk of my life. But in terms of actually, I need to start making something that I could then put in front of people to ultimately sell them a book, probably about a year and a half.
Random question. Do you watch wrestling by any chance?
Oh, yes.
Okay, no, for real. Okay, your whole thing about gameplay and basically trying to pigeonhole people and you're supposed to play this way versus that way.
John Cena.
It's wrestling to a T. No, it's not John Cena. It's actually Roman Reigns.
Well, yeah,
because you just had Daniel Bryan retire, right? And they're basically trying to, and he was the organic version of what you're saying.
Yes.
And he was very organically, he pushed basically the game developers, Vince McMahon, to react to it, and it worked. And now they're trying to do the reverse with Roman Reigns. They're trying to force him down people's throats to be the same the same exact kind of modular character or creation.
Right.
But he's not.
Well, I mean, I think it's a very good point, because I certainly use wrestling terms a lot because it has a great vocabulary in terms of how to handle interactive media. And one of them is heat. The idea is that you're getting attention from the audience. And I use John Cena a lot is because John Cena gets booed and cheered pretty consistently on a regular basis. But when originally, like you said, he's being jammed up people's throats as a hero like 6-7 years ago. And then people started booing him as a result of that. And John recognized this and started playing to that.
Oh, yes.
Without becoming a bad guy character. And I think the same thing as a game designer. It's like doing the fact that people are engaged in what I'm doing, whether they like it or don't like it, shows that they're interested. And they're involved in the product. They're involved, in this case, the product of the wrestler. So having that heat is like, people who are, like, as long as they're playing the game, as long as they're into it, because there are people who play games just to hate on them. I mean, like the infamous video of, I've been playing Skyrim for 200 hours and it's terrible. And it's just like, what? You played it for 200 hours!
Why are you playing it?
After a year and a half of playing, I've decided this actually is crap.
It's like those beta testers who just play the game just so that they can just dump in the chat. They're like, God, this is terrible. I should be playing World of Warcraft. Go play World of Warcraft. For the love of God, leave now.
Right, but the thing is that as hard as, and certainly it's hard for me sometimes to look at that, but I also have to say they're engaged.
Right.
Their level of engagement is they express it through frustration and through outrage, but there's still engagement there. And as a designer, at a certain point in time, you have to accept that. One of the things I learned from CCP was watching the EVE Online communities because, boy, howdy, do they have opinions.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they're engaged. I mean, yes, there's a 50-page flame war thread about how the price of monocles, but by God, they're engaged in that particular dynamic right now.
Yep.
I don't play EVE, but it sure as hell is interesting to follow.
It is fascinating to watch. Much like an explosion, it's really cool to watch from a distance.
Yeah.
But I mean, some people are really into it, and lots of my friends are really into it. And it's like one of those. I don't share the things that they enjoy it for reasons that I don't find enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they do enjoy it is infectious. Again, like watching, it's like I don't. It's not a game I would play regularly, but I love the fact that you're so excited by this. And as a designer, you have to kind of embrace that. It's like, this guy really has a very strong opinions about why spears require 2 hands as opposed to 1 hand. He's very, very passionate about that. But the fact that he's telling a lot of people about that shows that he's engaged. He's interested. He wants this game to be better. And he's expressing that in a way to show to people that I want this to improve. It seems minuscule, but to that person, it's very important. To say that I really want to see cats in the game. That's not like saying your game is stupid because it doesn't have cats. It's because I want this game to grow and to be inclusive of this thing that I also find interesting.
Right.
And sometimes the answer is no, that's not going to work. Not for cats. But sometimes as a designer, you have to go. This is again that guiding point. This is where I need the game to go. I've made these decisions. It has to go in this particular direction. But I hear what you're saying, and I respect the fact that you're passionate about this, even if I don't agree with what you feel needs to be done. And so many times, I found that just saying, I hear you, I respect you, I don't agree, they'll go, okay, well, thank you for listening to me. And they're still being engaged with it. They just want to be heard because they're excited and passionate. So it's heat, man. It's like, they love you or hate you, but if they're talking about you, if they're into it, if they're really paying attention, then you got them on the hook.
You don't want expecting.
Yeah, you don't want to expect it.
That's
You don't
what
want,
it is.
you don't want this thing, get off my screen.
Go away. Yeah.
Right, and then it's like, oh, this is stupid.
So, Eddie, I've got one more question for you, and
Sure.
I'm sure that everyone who's actually seen the Kickstarter page has this question, and that is, how crazy of a taskmaster is Murray?
Oh, he's vicious. I mean, he will cough at me. It's like, hey, I need something done. Hey. In my office, he has a little bed next to my desk, and so most times he'll spin around and fall asleep, and it's fine. Sometimes he snores so loud that people on the Skype calls are like, "Is that your dog?" It's like, no, it's not the building falling down. It's just my dog sleeping. But every once in a while, he's like, hey, it's random o'clock, and I need to go outside, so I don't care what you're doing. I gotta go. And I mean, I have gotten off calls from people in Germany. It's like, hey guys, I'm great to talk about this, but my dog needs to go walking, so I'm done. I'm out. I gotta go. Bye. So yeah, he's pretty harsh, but we make it through. He helps push the company along.
Nice.
Well, all right. I want to thank you, Eddie, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
It has been awesome. Everyone, of course, go to Kickstarter, check out Pugmire. It's almost 1,000 times over the initial goal.
Quick, Ian, what percentage is it again? 900 something?
995% or something.
Ian will tell me.
Yeah, it's.
He's already run my interview, so it's.
I think it's like 950.
955. There it is.
955. So. There you go. Once again, thank you so much, Eddie. And hopefully everyone out there can enjoy Pugmire in some shape or form. I actually am probably going to try to enjoy it in like every single form possible, be it the anthology.
Hopefully there'll be lots of them.
The audio. I'm very interested to see because I like the concept of continuously building on. Here's the set universe. Now let's add to it that's going to be beneficial for this universe with the audio drama and all that stuff. So I'm going to be basically bouncing all over the place. And of course, I had a lot of fun with the audio drama that I did do previously. So I'm excited about that, and of course all the anthologies and all the art. So, anyways, thank you so much, Eddie. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. So for myself, Charlie, Zealeus, and Eddie, it's been a pleasure to give you this amazing Pugmire interview. Be on the lookout for it to be online. I'll try to chop it up as best as I can so that people can get it in bite-sized chunks because that seems to do, better for people. Everyone doesn't want to sit through. I mean, seriously, you want to sit through this entire thing, but if you,
I'm gonna go home and watch
it.
I'm gonna read it to my cat in front of me. Listen to it.
Your cat's gonna be pissed. Anyways, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday, which will be just mere hours before Zealeus and I jump in a car and go up to Chattanooga.
Woo!
Woo! So, thanks, guys.